Okay, can you hear me? All right, perfect. Okay, good afternoon. It's officially good afternoon. Thank you for all coming today. My name is Olivier Maas. I'm from a company called Baserow. Maybe just for a quick show of hands, who knows Baserow? Okay, quite a few of you. Okay, great. Um, what I want to focus on today, I'm not going to actually do I'm not going to do a demo of Baserow because we can do plenty of demo at our booth. But I'm going. Okay, it 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 translates it immediately. Okay, okay, okay. C'est moi qui fais ça? Okay, great. Okay, I didn't know that. So the whole idea of today is I want to actually talk a little bit more about no code and open source. Right? I think you probably have been on the floor this morning, and it's amazing how many people are building new solutions, and we all promise you the moon about how much productivity gains you will have, how fast it goes and how easy and all that nice stuff, which is great. But I think there's a bit of a area which is fairly underrepresentative here. It's what's happening on the open source side. And I have a background more on DevOps and traditional IT and open source. And actually, open source is very prevalent in lots of companies, lots of organization. You have, whether it's a government institution, whether it's healthcare, whether it's enterprises, there's a big requirement to assess open source technology before doing anything else, right? So if you go to certain government entities, they will tell you, okay, it's open source first, and then we look at commercial software. So I want to talk a little bit about that, what actually we see as the power of no code combined with open source, because I think I'm probably the only one talking about open source in these 2 days, while there's about 160 people or 160 software providers which are present here. So I think it also shows I think how young maybe the no code movement is, and it's an aspect that we'll touch upon today. So I want to just do a quick introduction, give a heads up of where we are as Baserow, because it's been a year since we've been here, and then some of you maybe have followed us, others are maybe already users, maybe some of you are new in the room. Then I'll go into open source and what exactly we mean by that, what is our view on open source, what are people doing with open source Baserow, and then what does it mean to actually build a business. So can you actually build a profitable business on Baserow, and how do we enable that? And then I just want to open the floor to some questions. So if you have questions on roadmap or product or partnership programs, whatever you want to talk about. Okay, so I'll probably take max half an hour, 35 minutes on the presentation, and then we can have a conversation. Okay, so for those who know us, so you'll see we have a new logo, right? So this is not the only thing that's happening, but actually you see also that we position ourselves slightly different, right? It's now the open platform to build scalable databases and applications, right? And last year we were only no-code database. We're actually in the final stage of being able to release in November a beta version of what is our own version of an application builder, so that people that want to build a database are also able to build an interface, which is actually a web application for people that should not have access to the database. Okay, so you'll see that we're still an alternative to some of the other collaborative databases in here. I'm not going to say the names here. I'm not here to call out competitors. But our focus is really going to be continues to enable the different things around data, right? So I'll go into detail about that. In terms of company, we have now reached the 37,000 signups, right? So we have about 1,600 signups per month. So that's actually our organic growth of new users coming onto the platform, and that continues every day and on a very consistent way. We are just below 20 employees, so we're not hiring super aggressively, right? So we believe that with a small team of very good developer, you can produce more than with large teams of developers. On the sales side, we don't have lots of people. It's just basically me and someone in the United States, and then the rest is basically community support. we've had some funding, so we haven't done another round since last year, right? We're still doing fine with the funding round that we had 2 years ago, and then we start to really see the industries that are coming to us. So we really have a validation that, and I'll give some of the examples in the manufacturing space, in the government space, in the technology space, in the healthcare, and in the banking. These are typically sectors whereby the data sensitivities might be a little bit higher, and they are very hesitant in using some of these SaaS tools available. That means that our sweet spot in terms of real use cases is around mid-market, enterprise, public sector, but we have a lot of free users, right? I think probably 90% of our users are not paying for Baserow. They use the open source version, they test it, and once the business case is valid, then they come to us if they need some additional features. Region-wise, interesting enough, we thought it would be Europe first. It's actually US and Canada first, so it's probably between 50 and 60% of our users are over there, and the rest is in Europe, and a little bit in Asia. We're remote only company, or remote first, so we use a lot of the tools that are here on the floor in order to stay productive. So maybe just to say what we do for those, and apologies for those who know us, I'm just gonna make sure that everybody's on the same page for those who don't know Baserow. We structure data, right? That's important. We visualize it. We make it accessible for people that are non-technical users. So the focus on the user interface is very strong to make sure that if you are non-technical users, you can actually build a database. We enable self-service capabilities. I think IT needs to be put in the hands of the business and make sure that they can actually self-serve and build what they want to do, so without having to go to the IT team for every request. We make traceability possible, which is important if you are in the insurance world, if you're in the healthcare world, so that you actually can track what has happened in the data. So with Audit Log, you can actually granularly see who has made changes on a workplace, in a database, what type of actions have been taken. We address the whole governance and regulated area, whereby you need to have very stringent role-based access control. So this is something that we launched about a year ago, and that's really what makes the difference for some of the larger companies to adopt this, is because of the management of the access in the data. That's also why we're building the application builder. The reason is that not everybody should have access to the database, so you cannot regulate the access to a specific field into a database with role-based access control. It becomes too complicated, so you build an interface. That interface is actually a proper application so that people can interact with certain fields on the database. We make automations possible. We don't have our own native automation, so for those who want to know when is it coming, it's something that we have previewed for Q1 2024, okay, so that we have a level of automations in the tool. Right now we integrate with Make, Zapier, and Annotate predominantly. We allow the customizations of fields. So for those who are a little bit more technical that want to build plugins, you can actually do that in Baserow. You can actually build new type fields based on what you need if it's not on a roadmap. So we say, well, if it's on our roadmap, we'll take it. If you don't want to wait, you can actually build it yourself. And then we focused a lot on performance in the last 6 months. That means right now you can do millions of rows in Baserow without losing the speed. So we think we were fast, but we have even made a bigger jump forward, right? And then you'll see the announcement in a couple of weeks. We're in the final stage to be fully HIPAA, SOC, and GDPR compliant for our SaaS offering, right? And then our self-hosted customers, typically they don't care too much because they're self-hosted. In terms of the key features, I don't think I'm going to go too much into the details right now because that's not the intent of today, but basically we're working hard to have feature parity for all the core features that people expect from other tools out there. So that means things like group by, advanced filtering, two-factor authentication, some of the things that are must-have. If you go to our website, we have a very public roadmap. You can see what's coming for the rest of the year. You have access to our GitLab repository. We're very transparent on that to make sure that you know what's going on. We have taken a lot of competitor customers to Baserow in the last couple of quarters, which is great input because we know, okay, you really need to build this because we're using a lot of that feature. So that is Bram, my co-founder, who's working a lot on that, and you'll see what's happening till the end of the year, and then next year the whole application builder will be GA. In terms of the type of users, we've seen not drastic change from last year. I mean, what we see, it's typically a business and IT. There's a little bit of both. Why? Because we tend to enter through the front door. So you can't do really shadow IT. You can do shadow IT with Baserow, but it's kind of silly because if there is a security issue or if there is something that you need to address with your IT, your head of IT, you can actually take Baserow, it's open source, you can put it in the hand of the IT team and they will say, okay, it looks good or it doesn't look good. So we typically come into the front door. That means that you have the business and then you have someone from IT, you will have someone from the security team, and we are properly onboarded as a technology. So you will see that Baserow is either used for free and then people test it, or when they use it in paid version, you will come through the front door and then you will be properly onboarded as a vendor. Sometimes takes a little bit longer, but then when you're in the door with the right accreditation from the security, from the IT team, and from the business, you're typically there for the longer time. So that means program management, DevOps, production in the industry. I'll give you some examples. Marketing team, of course, comes a lot, but also research, the government entities, lots of startups, right? So people that build a business. I'll show some examples today, and then the typical teams that need a collaborative database. Here's the sign-up. So last year when we were here, we had about 22,000. So it's a nice, continued increase. I have no idea how many people are using the self-hosted, but we don't track that. So we think it's about a multiple of that number. So it's good to see that lots of people are continue to signing up. The type of signups have changed. Last year when I think we just launched Baserow Enterprise as the very first time. And now we're 1 year further, so we see that a lot of signups are actually coming from people that are in proper companies, which is good because our revenue model, it's free for everyone unless you have a specific team and you need specific paid features, then you're going to go into one of our paid plans. So we need a paid plan to be a company, right? But with the whole idea that we will push as many features to the free versions, and we let the people that actually run a business on it pay for the people that use the free version because they are smaller structure, because they are a non-profit organization, or because they are solopreneurs. Okay, so let me dive into open source. So maybe show of hand, who thinks understand really well what open source means? Great. Okay, so you guys can challenge me, please. What I was saying is that so we're in this NoCode summit, and actually, if you look at most of the NoCode tools currently, they are either most of them are SaaS only, right? It seems to be the revenue model that every investors want to see. In the past, you used to purchase software, you bought it once, you had a perpetual license, and it was yours, right? And now everybody needs to go SaaS, which is, in a way, you wonder why it moved that way, because it's still the same software, it's just a different business model, and it's not because you have a SaaS model that it's more sticky, right? Actually, your customer can churn every month, right? Your customer can churn every year just as much as you have when you have another license model. But the point is that all the companies here are SaaS only, and they are closed source, right? So that's the model. You have to live with it. If you don't care about that, then all these tools are fantastic, but they have another problem, right? And that's a really legitimate problem. It's about scalability, and the scalability is not just about the performance at scale, so the limitation that is put in the price plans. There's actually 3 limitations on the scaling. There's the limitation on the limits they're imposed in the different price points in the different plans. Then there is the limitation on the scale on the performance. If you really start to have large sets of data, does that tool actually hold? And then there is a limitation on the pricing. So does it actually scale? If you have 5,000 employees, are you actually able to pay 5,000 times the unit price per user per month, right? Does it actually make sense, and does the value stay the same? So I think there's a big problem on scaling up from small to mid-size until you go to a real proper company where all of us would love to go to the big companies, but actually is the pricing model actually scaling? API access, for those of you who use APIs of other no-code tools, having a complete API where every endpoint or every functionality is an API is super important if you want to start to integrate with other tools. Data ownership, so it's great to be GDPR compliant, but it's very different to own your data, right? GDPR compliant, I mean, I'd say we are in the final stage of the GDPR compliance. It's not so complicated. It's the first time I do it, right? But actually you do it with a company. Actually, it sounds very difficult, but it's not. It's actually not difficult. It basically comes down to having certain processes. You can hire a firm who has already done everything for you, and then the only thing you need to be able to say, so if someone wants you to delete the data, that you allow that person to delete that data, but that's it. It doesn't say anything about what if your data gets lost, or how secure is it. So the data ownership is a big topic whereby GDPR is just not strong enough, right? It's just the right to be able to be forgotten. And then, closed software is also not accessible to everyone. So you can have free trials, but the open source is actually free for everyone. So it's a great enabler for lots of communities who do not have the budget. For people, I used to be a country manager for Cisco systems in Africa. So I went to a lot of African countries. There's a lot of incubators there, a lot of great talent that are moving into the IT space. Having an open source software community is super important for them because they have no budget. They have no budget to buy licenses. A free trial will not cook it. 50% discount on non-profit will also not solve the problem. So having open source software in the world is actually a great way of innovating and giving opportunities to people across the world. So in terms of enabler, so open source, and because people ask me sometimes, okay, so what's the big thing about open source? Because of a lot of the people that are not regular users of open source are usually thinking it's going to be less user-friendly. It's going to be maybe less polished, right? Because it's free. People think it's free, but actually, open source is an enabler for a couple of things, and I listed them here, right? So I'm just going to talk a little bit to each of them. But one of them is around business continuity. If you're an open source software and you go to a company, and if you're an agency, for instance, and you sell a project to a company, you can actually guarantee the business continuity through that software to the company. Why? Because you own the code. If we decide to do something crazy like doubling our pricing, or you get acquired, or we go bankrupt, you have the code, you have the time to actually make a migration whenever you want, or you continue to develop that software. And it happens more often than not, right? So there's a lot of tools out there, they get used, and then suddenly something changes, and you're hooked, right? Your data is there, your processes are there, you build a business. So that's probably the number one reason why companies are looking at either software they can deploy on their own servers or open source software, right? Because you have data ownership and because you have that business continuity. Security, it's the second thing. The open source enables security because people can self-host it, and also because you have access to the code. Right? We have a lot of users that actually look at our code and inspect it, and we have a lot of community users that will look into the code, and when they find a vulnerability on the security side, they will tell us in the community, and you can fix it immediately. This morning there was a student, and he was on my at our stand, and he was actually telling me, yeah, well, I learned in my training that actually open source is very susceptible to attacks, and it's very vulnerable. And I told him, well, it's quite the opposite, actually, because the code is open, you have a whole community watching it, and then you're much faster in identifying security flaws. So it's actually at least as secure as closed software. And then you have what I call the power of many. So because you have many users, you actually have a lot of people that can help you make the product better. And we get most of our input from the community, and you can do just as much quality assurance and innovation as you can in your own team. But it's much better to have thousands of people than have just a team of 9 or 10 developers that are trying to do everything. Then the extensibility, you can actually only do that through ways of plugins. So that means you can actually build something different. So we have some example I'll show on people that are actually building new functionalities on top of Baserow, and the scalability we discussed. So this is about being able to deploy in the way that you want to deploy yourself. So be it on Docker, be it on Kubernetes, if you have the infrastructure, if you have that knowledge, or if you have a partner that can do that, you can actually scale to the limits that you want. Profit, I think I'll show you that in a minute. And then being able to build the business case before you decide to spend money. I think that's super important because, I don't know, for those of you who've done 30 days trial, in 30 days you achieve nothing. I mean, you can look a little bit in the tool, then the day-to-day rush comes into and you forgot about that, your trial expires before you can really make the case if this thing was useful. So having a software which is free forever until you've proven the business case and you figure out, actually, I need some of these paid version, then that's something that is possible with open source. So let me give you some examples. Okay, so first, maybe the license that we have. So open source has a lot of different licenses. We have what we call an MIT license. So for those who are not familiar with open source licenses, that's the most permissive license that you can get. That means that you can build a business, you can take a software, you can build a business, you can sell to your customers, and if you don't need any of the paid version, you can actually do that without having to pay us anything, right? So you build a business. Most of the businesses built on software like ours require some sort of enterprise features for role-based access control and for things like that. But we also have a lot of entrepreneurs. I know they're building a business on Baserow, and we don't see any revenue, which is fine, right? Which is actually something that really fits the spirit of an open source platform, whereby we just want people to experiment and do things, right, and build a living. So here's an example. So this is something. It's a company in Australia, right? And they're a software vendor. And what they do, they go to real estate agents, and they say to real estate agents, well, look, what you are good at, you're as a founder, you're good at finding houses, and then you want to sell them or you want to rent them out, right? And then all the rest for you is just a burden, right? You have to manage your website, you have to do you have to collect the rents, you have to do maintenance on the houses. So you have a lot of operational day-to-day issues. What they did is they built a solution. Initially, it was built on a competitor platform. So I still have some screenshot of the old competitor in here. And then they built a layer in front of that, a dashboard with some automations. And what they did is they said, look, we're just going to refactor it. We build it on Baserow for a couple of reasons. One, we're not limited by the scale, so they host it on their own AWS instances. We can actually customize it and build our automations the way we want. And we make a profit on it. So that means that we have a business model whereby the agency, instead of getting nothing and just the services of what they were doing, are actually getting recurring revenue. Right? So this is a big strategic change that they're doing, whereby they're moving from being a services agency to be a services agency and a SaaS provider, right? Because then they can start offering that to, and they have hundreds of customers, right? They do 13 agencies per month. For us, it's great because we don't have that level of sales force in order to be going to, and we don't have the marketing power to do that, but they have their established community of users, and they develop their own market, right? So that's a very it's something you cannot do with any SaaS product. You cannot take a SaaS product and then say, okay, you build a business. There's a couple of risks of taking a SaaS product and then building a business around it. There's actually, you're building a shell on someone else's SaaS. The customer will have a contract with a SaaS provider and a contract with you, right? And that's very complicated because who's the single point of contact and who provides most value? Is it your piece of software that you build on top of the SaaS provider, or is it actually the software that you're using from the SaaS provider, right? And then that becomes that becomes a difficult conversation when it comes to renewal. Plus, you have no control on the cost of one of the elements that you have into your stack. Okay, so I don't know how many of you are also building solutions, right? Because a lot of the agencies today are mostly into implementing sorry for that, I should have changed my timing for that. A lot of the agencies are mostly taking SaaS tools and then putting them together as a, almost as you're building Legos. But if you're serious about actually building a solution, then you need to look into what you can find in the market in terms of open source and self-hosting capabilities. Just because you take a piece of IP, we're almost becoming like an extension of their developer team, because we build the product, they use it, they can rebrand that product and then sell it to their customers. Okay, so this is actually a pretty big go-to-market that we will also go after, because I think we have a way of enabling other small agencies and software vendors and resellers to build solutions for their market. And for us, it's a way of just scaling into different, very specific verticals. Here's another example that's from France. It's actually a company from Lille. The company is called Pingflow. And it's a small company. They are just, I think they're about 25 people. And they focus on industry, so manufacturing. And they had built a no-code solution whereby they, for the production managers. So every morning when you start the shift, or even night, you have shifts of 8 hours, the person who is responsible for the shift rally his team. And actually, I think I have a picture of that. Here you go. Right, so and they used to do basically they used to do that work with a whiteboard. So basically, what you had is they come into the manufacturing site. They start to gather all of the information from the previous shift. They print it out in different Excel formats and PowerPoints. They stick it on the whiteboards, and then they rally the team and say, okay, our top 3 priority for our shift is this. Our top 5 is this. Our top 20 is this. Here's what happened last shift. Here's what we need to produce, etc. So it's a briefing basically that happens on a day-to-day basis. So that company has built a front end, it's a digital wallboard that is sitting in the manufacturing side, and the back end they had one of our competitors, right? A SaaS product, a well-known SaaS product, starting with the A and ending with Able. And for them, they had the same problem, right? Because their customers were working in the SaaS database, and they also were using their front-end product. And then what happened is you had a support case, and then would start calling the software and say, okay, I have a problem with the database. Yes, but you have to call your support agent. And so it was a complicated situation. So they decided, okay, we'll take Baserow. We take it on our own servers. We'll host it. We integrate it with the front end. We build our own automations with n8n, and we offer that as a single solution. And we transition all of our customers. So they've transitioned all of their manufacturing customers to Baserow, except one, which we are in the final stage. And the good thing is, again, the same scenario. They have a recurring revenue. They have a license structure, which is 2 no-code tools together, and it's the same philosophy. So basically, they put it in the hand of the business, and they offer the support, and they offer the entire solution. So they rebranded. So actually, this thing here, this is Baserow, right? They rebranded it Table, not to rock the boat too much with their customers, right? So their customers used to have another brand, and then it's called Table, but it's Table powered by Baserow. So for us, it's perfectly fine if someone builds a white label product, include it into, and we will build all the features that they need. They have access to our development team directly, and we actually have a great partnership. And what happens then, because we publish this in the press, we write blogs about it, we put it on social media, then suddenly we get leads out of the United States from a manufacturer who has seen the solution and wants to know more. So then we connect them, and then suddenly that partner also starts to go international. So it works nice both way, and it's another examples of how to build that business on open source. So maybe I don't know how many of you are actually software vendors in the room, right? Or are ambition to become software vendor. But I think for the ISV, the real advantages is the time to value. So is how fast do you actually get a solution? And even if you're not an ISV, if you build something for, if you are a center of excellence within your organization, having the ability to have a fast time to value for the solution, because a lot of the things are pre-built by the components that you're using, is super useful. You stay relevant, because I think the big danger of any whether you're an agency or whether you're a reseller or even a software vendor, how do you stay relevant as you know the onboarding becomes easier, right? Everybody, we also got to do the same, right? We're going to build a Baserow Academy, so people will be very easily onboarded on the tool. So how do you stay relevant, whereby everybody tries to make it as easy as possible for the end user to immediately adopt the tool without needing big services, right? So you need to think about that. How do you, on the longer term, if everything becomes easier, and AI is only going to make it worse better for the customer, worse if you try to simplify life for the end user, because what happens, right? You can, in the future, every one of these tools, including Baserow, will have an AI component. So you will be able to ask the questions, and even the difficult things that maybe you're hired for, they'll be able to ask it. It will create code, it will create formulas, it will create data schemas, it will create the application schema. Everything will happen in the tool. So on the long term, what's the value add that you provide? Most of the IT sector is actually alive because of the complexity, whether it's installing hardware, whether it's configuring, whether it's maintaining, whether it's on the DevOps side, whether it's you want to scale and you want to run on Kubernetes versus Docker versus whether it's bare metal. That huge stack of complexity is actually keeping the IT world alive. So if you are in the no-code space, you actually take the space whereby there's the biggest risk on medium term that you are irrelevant, because it's just going to be easy. You're going to have either really stupid users that do not know anything about it, that you will help, and maybe you don't enjoy that, or you're going to have smart users that have great projects and that don't need you, right? So how do you play on the longer term on that front, whereby you can say, actually, I'm building something, and I'm just offering you a solution, and I have built it with components which are open source, which I can self-host, and I can evolve my business into that direction. Maybe I'm a little bit, provocative here, but I think it's a real, if you are in this business for selling no-code services, just consider that, right? That people are doing a lot of things themselves, right? Here, for instance, this is an example. This is a customer who is actually, one of our free users, right? It's a manufacturer, and it's great because they've done everything themselves. I've never spoken to the customer, right? I just got the use case. I asked in the community, and then they send me, hey, here's what we've built. So basically, what they do, they're manufacturing furniture from recycled wood, and what they do, they run the whole company on Baserow, right? We haven't done anything. I haven't done any services. They've actually just took the application, and then they start building on it. So they calculate all of the cost for every unit. So they keep track of the supply cost for energy cost, material cost. They look how many hours. They look at the salary wages of their workers, and then they make a calculation for every piece that they've been working on, how much it was cost. They do the whole machine database maintenance. So they have a factory, and then they have all the manuals in Baserow. They have all the pictures if things have been defect. They note down what has been done by who in terms of maintenance interval. They do the whole scheduling of the maintenance, and everything is centralized there. And then they also have the whole design database. So they have an e-commerce shop. If you look them up, you'll get the presentation, but you look them up, and then actually on the website, it's the database of Baserow that is then exposed partially in the e-commerce, and all of their designers are submitting their designs and the description through a form. This used to be a company which was also run on spreadsheets in the past, and they decided to go with Baserow. And it's one of these users which are the free users, which have, I'm very happy for them. It doesn't make me any revenue, but it's a great use case to show the power when, people want to do something by their own. And actually, this is the one you built, right, Frédéric? So thanks for that. So Frédéric is one of our community members, very active, and he built this great nutrition app. I think you do it. I don't think you want to do a business out of it. Or do you want to do a business out of it? Or is it more like a free like a hobby project? Actually, a hobby project. Okay. So support is hobby. He actually made it with Retool and Baserow because we don't have yet a front end application builder to play around with. But this is one of these other things that we get out of the community where people just have, it's free. Frederick uses that version, and then you just put things out in the market and see if people use it. Let me talk a little bit about enterprise and public sector, because we talked about open source and why that matters to them. And you can see there's a bit of there's a bunch of nice logos in here, right? All of the reasons that why these companies came to us is around security, around scalability, and around data ownership. So it has, and a lot of these people actually are also users of other technology, right? Or they're still using it, or they're moving away, or some teams are using another technology. And then the software vendors come to us because of the profitability aspect. They can build a business. So I would say if you do projects and you have certain profile of users, if you want to move into something which is likely a slightly higher market, whether it's in the mid-market space, you don't have to go all the way to the enterprise space or to the public sector space. But if you are in a sector whereby you want to tackle these issues, then you're going to have to make a choice on the portfolio. You can have a portfolio which is great for startups or maybe less critical data, and then you maybe have in your portfolio a toolbox of alternative tools, and you can always win. Right? So my message for you who are actually doing projects, don't limit yourself, because I see a lot of digital agencies are all taking the same 4 or 5 key or main tools, right? And I'm thinking that's great because you leverage the power of the marketing of these organizations, but think how you're gonna ultimately say yes all the time, and do you need to have a backup somewhere? You don't have to make a choice just for open source, but just make sure you never have to say no, right? And if someone says, yeah, but what about GDPR? What about security? What about scalability? You say, okay, then I would recommend that stack, right? And make sure that you understand that stack as well. And there's other open source tools out there. I don't say you have to take Baserow as an only tool, but look at the automations, right? What are automations tools that would be open source? What are application builders that are open source? Because if you once you go into that logic with your conversation, you need to go all the way, right? You can't say, I'm doing the database, open source, self-hosted, great, it's secure, but then I do my automations with a SaaS provider, and then you actually go back into the internet and the security flaws that you might have there. Okay, so you have to think the entire chain, and then you will be able to always say yes. So in summary, I put when are we? It could be when is open source a great fit? I think it's usually a good fit when compliance becomes an issue. So if you have a customer that needs to do something on compliance, then think about Baserow and some of these other tools that are open source. When you want to have the option to do self-hosting versus SaaS, then think about a tool like ours. When scalability becomes an issue, and I'm not talking 50,000 rows or 100,000 rows, but people that say, okay, I don't want to be limited. I want to be able to have, maybe one team will use 100,000 rows, the other team might need a couple of millions because they just have a huge database, and I want something that is performant. And I would also want to be able to scale from a pricing perspective, right? So that's what I would think about it. Freedom is a big thing, here in France they call it data sovereignty, right? So there's a lot happening. It's almost a political agenda also, right? So having ownership, being able to build your own clouds, your local clouds, your own data, it's a big thing, and it's not going to diminish, right? And so what you will see is as soon as that becomes a question mark, right, or provoke or ask the question, right? Ask the question if that is something that is on their mind, because you might lose a project because they'll say, well, actually, it's not great, these no-code tools, because we have to go to the cloud. Just be upfront. Say, okay, if you are these things that matter to you, because then I'll propose you a stack that will tackle that. And then on the value, I think it's also important. We've seen some pretty drastic price changing of a couple of players in the market recently, and that's very difficult. I was talking to one of a big enterprise this morning, and said, "Well, I'm quite disappointed by the no-code ecosystem. All your startups here, you're all pricing on per user, right? But I have 100,000 employees, so and I cannot say if when I build something, 10,000 are going to use it, or 20,000 or 30 users. So what am I supposed to say to my CFO? Well, I don't know if this is going to cost 5,000 or if it's going to cost 500,000, right? You have to budget. A company has to budget. A government ministry have to budget. So you have to be able to give predictability on the cost as well. So what we're doing with the price per user, and we also have that, at some point we're going to have to figure out how to include predictability. Because if you're not able to predict, you cannot budget, and if you cannot budget, well, you're not if you're not on the budget line for next year, you're going to have to tap into discretionary spending, like they call it, and that's not a lot of money, right? So, so that is when we are a great fit. I'm not going to go into the pricing. You can see that on our website. So I wanted to finish before I go into Q&A on what you can expect from us in 2024. Okay, so. We are launching end of November in a beta our application builder. Right? So with the same ideas that it's going to be open source, it will be free. Right? So we're launching the open source version first, so that everybody can adopt it. Okay, so if you're on our newsletter or you want to follow us, check that out. You'll see there's a beta program coming, and then start giving us feedback. Right? It's going to be, we position ourselves a bit more complicated than software, less complicated than Bubble. So we're going to be somewhere around, what's in the middle, maybe Glide type of application builder. So we can actually build internal tools, but also external applications. In the beginning, it's going to be just with Baserow as the data source, but then moving forward, you will be able to connect to all sorts of data sources, right? Whether it's Airtable, whether it's a Google Sheets, whether it's an existing database. So you'll be able to build applications regardless of the database. These applications will scale, right? So it's going to be, it's not just going to be for internal use, but you can actually build entire websites with it. You can build portals with it, so that you can restrict the access. On the database side, our big focus for 2024 is going to be inject AI in the database, right? And we'll also inject AI in the application builder, but we need a couple of iterations before we do so. We'll have some of the big feature gaps that we might still have that are really important for existing users of other applications, of other no-code databases, is something that we're addressing this month and till the end of the year. And then in Q1 2024, we should be at par with the big features there. We'll continue to work on scalability and on security, and then you'll see these AI features. And then automations, which is something that a lot of people are asking us, is okay, I use the automation. I don't want to use per se Make or Edit-N or Zapier. I want to have some native automations in the tool. That's part of the application builder module, right? So we have already prepared everything to have the automations included, and then we'll start building that as a separate module in the beginning of 2024. Everything will be open source. It's still going to be SaaS or self-hosted, so you can also host your applications yourself. We'll focus on scalability, so that means that any application, you can have millions of visitors, it's going to scale. It will have API first, you'll have plugins, it will have many data sources. It's going to be no code, so we still want to make sure that people that are not technical are going to be able to use it, and it will be AI powered. Here's where you can find us, and then I don't have much time. I saw it took a little bit longer, but maybe do we have a few minutes just for a few questions, if there are questions? Yes.
Yeah, so you're one of the few people actually doing open source, as you already mentioned, but you're also one in the space at this point. Do you feel a lot of pushback within like the whole community of doing open source, even though I think it's a good direction to go in, but from just the environment you're in, do you feel a lot of
From the no-code community, you mean?
not only the community, but like also the other SaaS providers and just the entire environment, the entire space?
No, I think there's one other. I think Stacker is also open source, if I'm not mistaken, right? So, maybe I don't hear it. They didn't come to me and say, you're really an asshole that you're doing open source because you're going to ruin a business model. I think it's a different it's a different way of driving adoption for your product, right? So why I've worked in a couple of open source companies in the past, and for us it's not per se because we are bon samaritain, right? It's a no. We want adoption, right? We want to put innovation and adoption in the hands of everybody as much as possible. So I think we'll get pushback for sure because even if it's free and even our paid version are pretty aggressive to make sure that we are we get adoption. But I'm not too much looking at the other players. Actually, I have a very razor sharp. I know exactly what a DevOps team is thinking about NoCode today, right? They're thinking nothing, right? We don't exist in these organizations. They don't take us seriously. They think it's we all like it's like at school, right? You have the high school and then the we're not in kindergarten. I would say we're probably like between 6 and 12, and then they play in the big court, right? So I don't think we're taken seriously as a community at all yet. No, that we're maybe I used to work at Mendix and OutSystems. They're more on the low code space. They really get what you need to do in terms of application complexity and but also requires more investment, requires more skills. So I think what we can do if as a community we start thinking about, okay, if you really want to go into the data sets that matters and the processes that matter and the scale that matter, you don't have to go straight to the CAC 40 or to the Eurostock, to the people that are or the S&P 500 companies. But there's a great mid-market. The mid-market segments is companies which have 300 employees to 1,000 employees. They have the same problem, right, up to 2,000. And when SUSE acquired Rancher, where I used to work before, we entered a company of 2,000 people. There was a lot of the problems we're solving, we can solve with no code. So I think my focus is not so much what the other things is more, but we tend to support other players which are open source, right? So we like n8n, we like other open source tools. We like things which are front-end open source because I think that fits our philosophy. And then if we can integrate with these tools, you can actually offer a full solution that matters. Any other questions? Yep. Hello. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually a great question. Let me think about that a little bit of the conversation we had. Most of the people that have come to us knew which data problem they wanted to solve, but also realize in which organizations they are, right? So if you, a good example is Royal Bank of Canada, for instance, right? It's the biggest bank of Canada. The entry point was someone who's a very senior guy in the organization, and he used our platform for actually for a private use case, right? But he knew, okay, I like this because it's open source. I like this because it can do what I do, and I can bring that into my team. But he also knew, okay, if I bring it into my team, I'm a bank, super regulated, right? So I have to pass all these different steps, and otherwise we would never have been considered even to be introduced into the organization. So I think what you see is that people test the product with the understanding that if it's something that solves a problem, I'll be able to use it in my organization. And not everybody needs open source, right? Not everybody has all this stringent security aspect, but what people want is freedom and scalability. That doesn't, that's something else than governance and security, right? So if you, so I would say the sales cycle is actually easier if you talk to IT people, because they understand and they will inspect our code, right? So they'll see it's good code, right? I like how it's written. If you go from a business side, it will be more an explanation of the process. But then we're lagging a little bit behind in terms of great tutorials, academy, all that stuff. So I'm putting a lot of effort to that to bring that out also beginning of next year, because then you can have a lot of adoption from non-IT users. But I think open source does require a little bit of explanation for people who do not understand it, because a lot of people think, hey, it's open source, so it's free. Right? And because it's free, it's probably not as good as a paid software. That's the impression that people had. And it used to be true, right? 15 years ago, free software was really crappy, right? You want to have a free version of an email software, it was actually really bad. And the user interface is not good. But in the meantime, there's a lot of great open source products out there. We always say you have to have a business model behind your open source model. If there's no business model, how are you going to finance that on the longer run? Right? I would get worried as a customer. So you need to have something which pushes you to actually have a business model, and where people will see actually the ease of use is as great as a commercial software. The only difference is it's open source, but it's not free. Right? It's free if you want to be free, but if you need certain more advanced features, you'll also have to pay. It's just that you get another. So, but I think and then I'm going to stop answering that. But you always, the best sales cycle is if you have both the IT team and the business team together. Having worked at other low-code platforms, you would always bring them in the room. Always. You start with business, then you bring IT, and the idea is to bring them together, because then you get buy-in, and then you can get. Actually, we could get a lot more sales when the IT team vetted us, and you're in the catalog, and they support the expansion of your software within the teams. And there was one more question, I think, and then I think we need to stop. Yeah. 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 Yeah, it's a great question. So we welcome contributions, but we actually also manage the roadmap very stringently ourselves. So it's a little bit of a, so we like contributions through plugins more than directly into our feature roadmap. And it's quite common, right? That where you actually have a developer team, we expose, and then we tell people, if you have some ideas, build the plugin, you provide the framework for the plugin, and they, will advertise it in the community. In terms of feature requests in roadmap, we actually use Baserow. We have a table whereby we have like a point system, whereby we say, okay, you have all the plus points, which is, does it help adoption? Are we going to maybe make some revenue out of it possible? Is it something that many customers want? And then on the negative, is it hard to develop? Is there a risk for us? Have we done it before, etc.? And then we rate these things in every month. We relook at the new community requests, and then we try to make that as mathematical as possible. I think I need to stop, right? Because you guys are hungry. So thanks a lot, and we'll be at the stand. Thanks.